All right. Welcome back to another episode of the School of Weird. Today, I am joined with an amazing guest who's overcome so many things, and we're going to drop into all of that. That is Dan MacQueen. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Frankie, lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, all good. So glad that we met down in Scottsdale. I was so inspired by your story that I wanted to have you on the show today. Wanted to take just a brief minute before we drop into some of the exciting unlocks around loving your weird and different things that you've uncovered that you're going to share with the world. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about kind of who are you and, what is it that you are called to do right now?
Yeah, thanks, Frankie. I appreciate that. So, who am I? I was a world traveler up until about 2 years ago when I moved back to Vancouver, Canada. I was living in London, England. I'm a
Right.
brain injury survivor, which is what my kind of value prop is and what we're going to be talking about today. And that's what kind of makes me more interesting and dynamic than your typical Canadian kid.
Mm-hmm.
Surviving two emergency brain surgeries in London, England, and having to relearn how to walk, talk, and smile again.
Wow.
It's given me a perspective that is life changing. Like I will change my whole vibe based on this perspective that I've gained from this experience. Because when you're flat out on your back, looking up at the stars, and you're trying to figure out how to get out of here, like you get pretty clear pretty quickly on how to get out of this and get back to life. So it's not really answering your question, but that's kind of who I am today, Frankie.
Well, that brings me to another question then. Okay, so how long ago did you have the brain trauma?
2014, and then a second setback in 2015. So I think 8 years
Wow.
from the last brain surgery. But I've had eye surgeries a few times. You'll notice, apologies for those watching, but my eyes jarred around a lot, and that's what I've got double vision, Frankie, which means I see two of you. Which, believe me, Frankie, I've seen plenty worse than you. But it's a lot to take on, Frankie. I'll be honest with you.
Two of some people, yeah, that's rough. Okay, so in 2014, you're just a normal person. You're in London or you're in Canada?
London, England, yeah,
All right, you're just a normal person. How old are you at that point?
28.
Mm. So you're
So
28, living
living
a
my best
fairly
life in
normal
London,
life, living your
England.
best life, London, England. And what happened?
So I'm living my best life, working in tech, big nights out, recklessly spending my paycheck in the first week in London. Because in London, you get paid once a month,
Oh,
which is an adjustment and a half. It took me a few months to get used to this. But you go out big, you're the big guy in town buying everyone pints, and then the next day you're like, oh, this is the only paycheck I get for the month.
oh
And we're
yeah.
eating
And
beans
London
on
is
toast the rest
expensive.
of the month in like London, so that was like an adjustment.
I lived there
But
for 4 months when I was right out of high school.
whereabouts?
So a little bit north of London in Harpenden.
Cool.
I don't know if you know where that is. It's kind of like on the way to I think it's Luthro or I
Luton.
forget which what Luton. Yeah, it's right below
Um,
Luton on the train.
yeah, wonderful. It's a great spot. I love London. I was there for 10 years.
Yeah,
So
not cheap.
not cheap at all, Frankie, that's for sure. But it was an experience of my time and like a chapter of my life that I'm really grateful I had.
Yeah.
But I'm living all this to say I'm having my best life, traveling lots, big nights out, lots of cafes, just enjoying my life and having a great time. And I started having these headaches that were getting persistently worse over a few weeks. Like I was taking painkillers like candy for them. I went to A&E, which is accident and emergency in the UK, so ER in the US, I imagine. And I went there with the headaches, and they ran some tests, and they go, "We think it's vertigo. We'll send you home." The next day, I was on the tube. The tube's how you get around London.
Of course. Mind
And
the gap.
my vision, like the headaches were so bad, my vision started to fade in from the sides. As I got to Notting Hill and I went on the platform, my vision faded to black. I stepped onto the platform, I couldn't see a thing. And
Whoa.
I'm thinking, how am I getting out of this pickle? And I hadn't formulated a plan yet when my vision came back about 5 minutes later. But I went back to A&E the next day. Again, they thought it was vertigo and they sent me home. But on the way out, they also told me I could get my eyes checked in an optometrist. An optometrist, you say, Frankie, the eyes are an extension of the brain, right? So that kind of makes sense. I was midway through that exam with the optometrist, Mr. Patel. He stops the exam. Stops it midway through and he excuses himself from the room. He comes back a few minutes later with a sealed envelope, which he gives to me, and he goes, "You know, directly to Moorfields Hospital," which I did. Well, Frankie, tell a lie. I stopped at home first to grab a Jack Reacher book by Lee Childs. I figured I'd be in for a bit of a wait. Wanted a bite to eat. Phone charger and some stuff there, some supplies. Made my way to Moorfields Hospital. There, they escalated me up to Charing Cross Hospital. They ran the same test and escalated me up to Charing Cross Hospital. It turns out I had a dangerous buildup of pressure in my brain caused from a non-cancerous cyst in my head. Turns out I required emergency brain surgery tomorrow. It turns
Wow.
out my world's about to change altogether. So the last text message to my mom before I went to emergency brain surgery was, "I'll see you soon, Mom. I think I'll have a new haircut next time I see you. Love, Dan." So she's in the air flying to London on June 21st, 2014. I'm on the operating table. Something goes horribly wrong. And I have a massive bleed in the brain, a brain hemorrhage. I think the cyst
Oh,
burst when they operated. Mom lands and finds I'm in a critical condition. I was in a coma for 4 weeks. I was in and
cool.
out of consciousness for months after this. Things were dicey, touch and go. When all was said and done, I was learning how to walk, learning how to talk, and even how to smile again, Frankie.
Jeez, 4 week coma. Your mom must have been a wreck.
Yeah, she was not. She doesn't recall that time very fondly, so we try to avoid talking to her about it. But it's in the coma, they had to keep my core temperature down below 4 degrees. They used ice blankets above and below me to keep my core temperature down. This led to violent shivering, right? Violent shivering. My family says it's horrible to watch. Alarms constantly went off. His blood pressure spiked, her heart rate too high. They told my parents he may not make this.
Yeah,
Like, it was real dicey. And if I made it, what state would I be in? Brain injury? Like, you're not really sure what kind of quality of life you're going to have after a brain injury. Like, that's kind of, you need that to work, right?
yeah.
So I woke up from the coma 4 weeks later with my dad, mom, and brother on the bed. I'm trying to talk, but I can't talk because the tracheotomy chewed up my vocal cords. Had a tracheotomy to breathe and to get fluids into me. And so I pointed at my brother. I go, "You, give me a pen and paper." And right in the pen and paper, I go, "Frankie, get me out of here." And I show it to Cam and point to him like, "You, make this happen, bud." Because I was looking around me like, this looks expensive. I don't know where I am. What the hell's going on? Why are my parents in London? This doesn't make any sense. This is 4 weeks later on, right? Needless to say, he did not break me out of the hospital like I requested, but he was kind of there as a support system. But I was in the hospital for months after this, so it was pretty. I'm pretty glad he didn't try to break me out because it was. I
Yeah,
needed
that
the
probably
help,
could have
Frankie.
made
I
it
needed the
worse.
help for sure.
Yeah. Man, that is grueling. And I'm such a visual person when it comes to hospitals. My brother's a doctor, so he's since we were kids been would watch all this live surgeries on TV and stuff, and I'm like, ugh. So I'm like the worst at that. And man, that is so intense. So then in 2015, something got worse.
Yeah, so I after this brain surgery, I had a shunt put in that helps drain the fluid from my brain. It helps drain the fluid from my brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I rehabbed for a year to get back to walking, to talking, back to work 2 half days a week, 3 half days a week. And I meet my mom at the two before I went to the office just to kind of show that I got off on okay and like we're all good with that stuff. One day I
Mm-hmm.
didn't show up for the tube. So she calls me, no response. She walks back to my flat, which is about a 5 minute walk away. She opens the door and finds me unconscious on the floor. The shunt that's in my brain had blocked me into hydrocephalus or water on the brain. So
Oh,
we call 999, not 911, because it's, fun fact for your listeners, it's not 911 in the UK, it's 999.
yeah, got to remember
And
that.
they rush me to the hospital. And I wake up the next day in the hospital hearing the beeping noise of the heart rate monitor going off behind me. Beep, beep, beep. And I'm like, well, what happened? What happened? They go, "Dan, you had emergency brain surgery." I go, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, the shunt that's in your brain had blocked leading to hydrocephalus. So we got the blockage, but you're in the hospital again." I go, "Well, all my progress is washed away." I've been working for a year, Frankie, to get back to walking, to talking, to work, to some sort of normalcy to life, to get out of this hole that I found myself in. And this is ripped from underneath me in an instant. I was in a poor way right now mentally. Like, mentally, I was in shambles. I describe my recovery like a W, Frankie. So the first setback is the first drop of the W.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of climbed back up, maybe halfway back up the ladder. The second setback is not where the first one was, much lower. I call this the depths of the human experience, where all your hopes and dreams are snickered at. Thought you had a chance there, bud. Ha 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 ha. Like death, the Grim Reaper's just waiting in the background, like, "We're trying to get you down here, bud. Come on down."
Mm-hmm.
Like, I couldn't escape this, and I was working so hard to get back to anything, like 2 half days a week at work, 3 half days a week, and then, this out of nowhere floors me. And like, that was the most difficult part of my life to navigate that acute angle because everything you knew in your life, all the support was there, the medical stuff, it was, you had done that. So I wasn't entitled to do that again. My mom had to fight tooth and nail to get me back on some sort of like vocate, like a distance assistance from afar. But man, was this difficult. It was super frustrating as well.
Wow. And so then you've just slowly gone from there, 2015.
Yeah, every day I'm kind of like inching my way back to like, I'm never going to be clear of the brain hemorrhage. Like it's going to be something that lingers with me for life. Every day I wake up with intentionality. I wake up early. Usually go for a walk or exercise. Today I didn't because I knew I was going to meet up with you and it's snowing outside. So I figured I'd skip the walk today.
All right.
But I'll shower in the shower cold, meditate. I'll kind of gear up for the day. I'm gearing up, armoring up for the day to know, put my best
Which
self
I'm
forward.
guessing is like a solid, probably hour-long process, huh?
Yeah, for
2
sure.
hours sometimes. Yeah.
Hour-long process. Say like I've got it in about an hour, and like that's I know I'll ad hoc shift this around depending on what my schedule's like. But like today I've got this first call today, and this is at 11 o'clock Vancouver time, so it's not that taxing, but usually I'll get a bit earlier and like make this happen and armor up for the day because like the brain injury has got lingering effects, right? Like fatigue's there. The double vision's still there, which is wild. Lovely to see two of you, Frankie. But let me tell you, some people it's not the best. But fatigue.
When you're seeing
Freaking
two people, like, does that doesn't create headaches?
doesn't create headaches, but it creates like fatigue because my brain's like, well, what's the right image?
It's you're like overworking it.
Because
Wow.
my vision's not like this, right? It's like this.
Interesting.
And I had eye surgery in the left eye maybe 3, 4 months ago, 4 months ago. And before this, I was pretty confident looking at the screen directly, right? But now I'm turning my head a lot to the right because I don't trust the left eye. The left eye is fluttering a little bit from the surgery. And so my dad asked me, he goes, Dan, do you regret having the eye surgery? And I go quickly right off the hop. I'm like, yeah, it's changed everything. Like, I used to be much more confident looking at you and not tilting my head. But thinking back at it more, reflecting, I had more time to think about this. And I realized, like, I don't regret the eye surgery because I was taking the next step. Everything in life is about taking the next step forward,
Yeah.
progressing, challenging the status quo, right? There's this great story by this great book called The Fox, the Horse, the Boy, and the Mole. I might have
Oh
butchered it.
yeah. That have you seen that they adapted it to screen?
I have not, no.
It's beautiful.
But so a boy's walking through a thick wood, right, with a horse behind him,
Mm-hmm.
and he goes back to the horse. He goes, "I can't see a way through." And the horse goes, "Can you see your next step?" And the boy goes, "Yeah." So the horse says, "Well, then just take that." With this eye surgery, I was just taking that next step, the next step that's available for you. Maybe it opens up down here, but I can't lose that hunger for taking the next step because if I lose that, then I'm settling for life. Like they're settling for life, but like the status quo for like the eyes. Like, hey, maybe I can fix the eyes. Now I'm not so confident I can fix them, but hopefully I can get them a little more aligned and a bit more confident with the eyes. But I'm taking the next step, so I don't regret having the eye surgery. It was not ideal. It's not ideal now, but it's like the next step's what I was chasing. You always have to chase the next step. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I've kind of embodied with this recovery is taking that next step whenever it's available for me.
Listen, first off, you've got Apple TV is who put that out, by the way. It's beautiful the way they did it.
I'm
So, I
watching
mean,
that.
in fact, when you watch it, you're probably going to want to use clips in your keynote. It's that good. I mean, it is
Good.
just outstanding. So that is actually a wonderful story to borrow from. Question that crossed my mind: Have so the looking to the left or right like you do? That's all related to the vision.
Yeah.
Okay, what about an eye patch? And I know that's a little piratey. Have you played around with that? Does that help?
Yeah, no, I've used an eye patch in the past, and to be honest with the glasses, has been annoying. So like, I really try to avoid that, but I think it's coming down to the fact where I might have to just buck up and do that.
Well, you could
Um,
do something really fun with that, though. You know what I mean? Like eye patch is kind of badass. You know?
yeah, but I really don't like having the periphery vision cut off at this level. Like, I like being able to see this side of the room, even if it's not certain what the stuff is. It's the eye patch is something I could do, and I could get more into it, but I'm not there yet. I still prefer being able to see the around
Well,
me,
maybe
even
you
if I'm in
start with the
front of me.
hat. Maybe you start with the pirate hat or a hook. or a hook? Maybe you thought about doing a hook.
Well, Frankie, I've got these lovely pictures in my keynote that I show that I wear this eye patch and it's upside down. And I
Nice.
kind of call it out in the keynote. I go, does the eye patch look right to you? Some people might call this avant-garde, others fashion forward. I call this my confused pirate stage.
That's right.
I've got two prominent photos where I'm like walking on the Zimmer frame and walking in the hallways of the Wolfson with this eye patch on, ass backwards, and it's like, oh my god, man! But like, it's immortalized forever, so it's phenomenal to have that there, and it's just like
Yep.
you
That's
gotta
the
laugh
old.
at yourself, or you gotta laugh at the situation, right? It's so grim, it's so ridiculous. You gotta laugh at it, right?
Yeah, see, I already know that you have a great sense of humor on this. That's why, like, if for those of you watching, if I seemed like I wasn't like, if I was like having fun with this conversation, that's why I've already had this conversation with Dan separately, and I know that Dan loves the sense of humor part. So, because what are
Yeah,
you going to do?
let
Yeah,
me
those are
just
your
say,
two
like,
options, right? Laugh or cry in situations like
yeah,
that.
like, what are you gonna do? Like, whinge about it? No, like, poke fun, have fun. Like, I talk about my recovery in very joking terms because, and this thing trying to claim me twice, and like, it
Yep.
didn't get me. So like I'm gonna talk disrespect you to your face and be like, hey man, you thought you got me here? Yeah, laugh in your face. Like I really am so disrespectful with the brain injury because it tried to claim me twice and now I'm like, hey, I'm still standing here, bud. So like, yeah, I appreciate the commentary and I love it, Frankie. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, listen, no doubt you have gone through a very weird experience, weirder than many others, and you've found a way to love it. So this concept of love your weird, I feel like is not foreign to you by any means. Um, and as I've talked to you in the past, loving your weird isn't actually about necessarily external things or the way that we look per se, but the journey on the inside. And I know that you've been through hell and back, not just on the outside, but it sounds like on the inside in the course of your two W dips. And it's actually quite a weird looking W at that, right? The
It's a very weird looking
second
W.
dip,
That's
like
right,
you said,
Frankie. Yeah,
plants way down. So I will have to make a, I'm sure, do you have a graphic for that yet?
I should get one.
Yeah, make you a little graphic.
I should get
The
one.
weird W. Well, look, okay, so here we are. Now fast forward, you're in 2024. So it's been almost a decade at this point. And God bless you. And so
Thank you.
now you're a keynote speaker. Tell me about this. I mean, obviously that's how we met. My audience knows that I'm passionate about keynoting and thought leadership and authoring and all that. You and I met on stage in Scottsdale. We shared a stage down there. So how'd you get to that? Like, how did you go from I'm just trying to not be another drop in the W and try to just be a normal human to all of a sudden now you're a leader in the space, helping people go through. And what do you help people with? I know you help people, but tell me a little more about all that.
Yeah, thank you, Frankie. So my talks about perspective, mindset. Mindset is the biggest thing for me, right? I thought the physical stuff was the most difficult part, like not being able to walk for a few months. But quickly I discovered the mindset and the mental stuff was so much more difficult than that.
Mm-hmm.
This talk
So
was
much more.
born out of a talk I gave to outpatients in my old rehab center, Wolfson Rehab Center in London, England.
Oh,
And I would
awesome.
give this to outpatients there maybe once a quarter, like once every few months, to showcase a way through.
I
The
love
way
it.
out is through, right? And everyone says that, but like, let me show you how it is with my keynote and like how I gradually ramped up. Actually, the best testimonial I ever got from my keynote was from a patient of that talk I gave, and he goes, after hearing Dan talk about swimming and how difficult and joyful it was for him to swim, I decided to go back swimming again. I used to
Mm-hmm.
swim before the brain injury, but after the brain injury, I stopped because it was so intensive, so labor intensive. And I
Yeah,
go,
of course.
and like I caused him to start going back to the pool. Like that's impact 11, man. Like that means a lot to me. Like I might have changed. Maybe he didn't once. Maybe he stopped. But maybe he's still swimming now because of me, which is pretty cool.
Oh, it's incredible. When you actually see the impact firsthand and someone reports back to you on it, so many times it feels like we're just like kind of talking into the darkness with and trying to create a light in the midst of all this darkness. And when there's a beacon of light that pings back and lets you know that it worked, there's nothing more powerful and rewarding than that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So mindset is such a big deal. You hear people talk about mindset over matter. Obviously, you have a story of resilience, and have a man that fell in the hole twice and has been able to make it out. Which my friend Chris Shimbra and I talk a lot that apparently that's every human's favorite type of story. I'm sure you're aware of that, man, and the whole concept.
For sure, for sure. It's a good story. Of course, I would think that it's my story, Frankie. So I would always think that it's a good story. But
Well,
it's
that'd be
kind of
great. Your
that
story
W
too.
plot line is quite interesting and quite dynamic because it's like the first setback is not even close to the second setback. Like it's
Right,
not even the same
right,
ballpark. It's
right.
like I can't even
Hmm.
describe to you how low I was after the second setback, and I call this a pity spiral. The first setback took me about a month to get over mentally, to come to terms with it, to accept it. The second setback took about a week, where I was like, "Oh, whoa, woe is me. This isn't fair. This isn't fair." I had a third setback, which was my job loss this past autumn or last autumn, and I gave myself an afternoon to come to terms with it, to decide I'm a keynote speaker tomorrow. Now, I wasn't over the job loss in an afternoon, but I made the choice to accept it that afternoon. I'm a keynote speaker tomorrow, which means I need a computer today. Acceptance and fast tracking the acceptance piece is the most important thing I can pass along to your audience. Is like, it may not be fair. Life's not, someone told me this recently. Life's not fair, but it's not personal. It's not happening like because it's you, it's happening because it just happens. And you got to get over it and not think you're that important. Like,
It's interesting.
it's a lovely concept, but acceptance is so key. And that's difficult to hear from people because, like, they're like, well, you don't know my story. And I was like, hey, I don't know your story. You're right. Maybe your story is the worst in the world. But listen to what I've been through and listen to how I frame this in perspective, changed through this. And, like, maybe it's not the worst for you. Maybe it's not the worst for you. And, like, that perspective shift to, like, acceptance is so key, man. If you can get that around, like, you're invincible now. What are you going to come up with?
So I don't know if you realize this, but look, so I've worked with over 300 guys to help them get sober. So I've been sober for almost 16 years now from drugs and alcohol. And one of the things that you
Congratulations.
mentioned, thank you, is this outpatient. So your keynote thing came from helping other people that are in the middle of their W or their bottom, right?
Yeah.
And giving them hope. And um, I feel like I know the answer to this, but did in doing that, and this is what I'm assuming inspired you to be a keynote, it actually helped in your healing and your growth when you would go back and help them, right?
Oh, for sure. And I've got all these whimsical, like, expressions now, but, like, going through the shit, Frankie, I'm not that cute with these, like, lessons learned and what this means in the bigger scheme of things. It's like, it makes sense looking back. Going forward, you're just trying to survive your next breath.
Right.
So, like, it sounds all good and meaning behind this now, but, like, at the time it was let's
That's right.
fight for the next one, right? I'm holding on to my fingernails. Frankie, I was holding on to my fingernails to the wall, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure I can hold on any longer, but I'm not gonna let go. I made that choice a long time ago. I'm not gonna let go for it. It's gotta kick me off the wall to fall.
That's right.
And luckily, it broke, man. And I didn't think it would break, but it broke for me and it can break for you. But you got to hold on and keep going through this point, man. The way out
Yeah.
is through.
Yeah. See, my motto has always been don't flinch. And that's not about like not having questions about different things, but like when life hits or the W drops or bottom hits, you have to not flinch, meaning you have to stay the course. It doesn't mean you don't have a lot of emotions. My whole second book was about this idea of strategic emotions and the relationship they have to authentic success. And I say authentic success because goes beyond the linear success that people look for in business and things of that nature. But what you accidentally uncovered, I've found that some of the luckiest people in the world, you're included in this, unlock this secret to the universe. And that secret is that if you can take what's happened, because a lot of people ask the questions like, why me? Or like, if there's a God, why would he let this kind of stuff happen? Right. So people
Wrong
ask these
question.
big questions. Exactly. And but I actually know the answer. I do now know the answer of why me. So it's interesting that you said it's not personal because in fact, it isn't personal, but it is what you do with it is very personal, right? So the way I grab it and what I turn that into becomes personal, but therein lies the choice.
Yes, Frankie, that's amazing. And like a through line through my keynote that I use, and I'll just jump in and drop this quickly for you. It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters. And that's not mine, that's Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters. And it is very much a choice.
Yes.
And you make the choice every day that I'm going to fight this fight. And it may not be the best fight every day, but you got to fight the fight every day and you got to choose that fight. You
You have
can't
to
roll over
choose.
and die for this because that's not how you win in life. It's not by taking, I'll just take the loss. Like, no, I'm not going to accept this. Remember my GP Jens Foles told my parents, like, Dan, it was never a chore to see you because you never lost the glimmer in your eye, the light in your eyes. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. Because
Yeah.
I never wanted to lose that light, and I don't know if you can get that back if you lose the glimmer in your eye, right? Like I've got that now, and
It's hard. So it's interesting what you described, by the way. So many of my friends in addiction have gone through the exact same thing, and it's more than two W's. But it is worse. Like when you make your way out of addiction and then you fall again, what happens to the mind in that is very much like what you described. It is such a blow, and the second climb up is so much harder than the first one because
oh yeah,
it's not as poetic. There's not as much like naive hope anymore. Now
now
it's
it's
just
not
like you
this.
have to have an educated hope. And I'm going to tell you, the only way I've seen it work consistently with addicts or anyone rehabbing, which includes brain rehab, it's similar in that, first of all, the community and coming together with other people that have had the experience is critical. You are uniquely qualified to help the outpatients of these rehabs, or specifically what you went through, because of what you went through. I can't speak to the people at those outpatient rehabs the way you can. I cannot have the same impact. And that's why it's so important that you do continue to give that back. Because what I have found is the way for you, people like you and I, to stay at maximum hope, to stay at maximum acceptance, to stay at a place where, even with the limits physically that we have in this dimension, we can find limitlessness. To stay there is to absolutely bring someone with us, right? And because you've been to this dark place, people are willing to take what you're offering them in a keynote, right? Whether it be at a rehab or whether it be at a corporate conference, they're willing to take that and believe it because they know they've not had it as crappy or as painful as you have physically. And so they
That's
have
wonderful
to at least
said,
consider it.
Frankie. That's beautifully said. And I think like I share my story every time. A bit of it, I'll be honest, Frankie, is how do you like those apples? Like I've been through this. How do you like that apples? Like the Matt or Goodwill Hunting quote, but also to like get you to buy into what I'm selling. Like, why would I believe these hacks that you've got are the best way to do your morning routine, or like why meditation's key, or why cold
Mm-hmm.
showering's key, or
Mm-hmm.
why
Mm-hmm.
exercise key? It's like, well, because I've been through this, this, and this.
Yeah,
And if you can't understand what I've been through, then you're not going to buy into what I'm telling you to do. And I don't ever want to be prescriptive and saying you should do this, you should do that, because when someone tells me you should do this, the first thing I think of is, yeah, kick rocks, bud. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to be told what to do.
that's right.
If I can get you to buy into like, well, I'm doing this and this is why I did it this way, I'm like, well, that makes sense to me.
That's
If
it.
you can
Listen,
empathize with
all
me and
you can
understand
do,
what I'm pushing out, then I can
that's
buy into
right.
what you're selling. So that's why I'm trying to do
Well,
that.
and the truth is, we're not selling anything. All you're doing is sharing. You're
Yes.
sharing a gift that
Yeah.
worked for you. It might not work for everybody, but this is what worked for me. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt, it can work. And I've seen it work for other people. But I will tell you, the reason I'm a keynote speaker, so I think you know some of my background, but I was an serial entrepreneur for years. I still am fairly big in the private equity space, but I sold my company and I used that as the catalyst, kind of like the day you lost your job, as like, okay, now is the time that to not just part-time be a thought leader, part-time be a keynote speaker, part-time be an author. And that happened at the end of 21 for me. And the reason why I now know, because to be honest, like there's better jobs and better paying careers than being a keynote speaker, right? It is ridiculously rewarding when you're in the middle of it and everything's rolling, and when it's not, it's this interesting space where we have to not flinch, right? But what makes it worth it now, just as the same as it made it worth it when I was talking to rehabs of addicts and you were talking to rehabs of outpatient brain surgeries and traumas, it's the same thing, is that essentially the journey is for us more than anything. that's what makes it worth it, is because even if they don't change, we continue to change. And that's what I've told, people that are going through addiction, because they're like, they just want to have a better life, but they can't keep that better life. They can't stay sober unless they continue to help somebody else, because they're not going to find that fulfillment that brought them to the drug use to begin with.
That's a wonderfully said piece, and I want to talk about motivation for a second, Frankie. Motivation for me initially came from a very dark place. Like, you don't think I can do
Mm-hmm.
this? Okay, I want to prove you wrong. I've always been a chip on my shoulder kind of guy, undersized, dating up in the world, like dating girls well outside my league, and always being like kind of feeling like you're not good enough to be here, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna prove you wrong, and that's a very potent mix of motivation for sure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but like it's dark, it's twisted, but it burns bright and it burns hot, and it
Yeah.
consumes you. But once I beat you, and Frankie, with all due respect, I will beat you. It disappears like this, like it was
Yeah.
never there, right?
Yep.
I'm now transitioning that motivation to service. When I help you, your
That's
success
right.
is my success. This
That's right.
conversation is not the end of our relationship. This is like the start of a joint
That's right.
success, right? Your success is my success. When Frankie's bigger, I'm bigger. When I'm bigger, he's bigger. Like it's like it ties into like I'm lending a hand. I'm service based, and that's what speaking. I'm trying to transition that. That's now lending a service to you, helping you be better than yesterday.
Well,
But
it's
it's
interesting you
very
say that.
intentional.
Yeah, listen, a lot of people, a lot of us, when we're still learning emotional intelligence and everything else, we use fear because it's the most obvious, potent, as you say, catalyst, right? You can
Yeah.
dress it up whatever you want, but at the bottom of it is fear. And fear is an incredible teacher. It's tied to pain, and it is something that can keep you moving forward, right? But it is always empty at the finish line, right?
Always empty. Always
Always
empty.
empty.
That's so
So,
key, Frankie. That's so key.
yes. So what is the opposite of fear? Not courage. It's love.
Yeah.
Love is the opposite of fear. Service is a part of the love category.
Yes,
Giving is
sir.
a
Yes,
part
sir.
of
Yes,
the
sir.
love category. Generosity is a part of the love category. Authenticity, imagination, the things that are core values for the work I do. But at the end of it, I can make the same decisions. But if one is out of love, and by the way, it could be love for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think people realize how much they are not able to give. They're not able to love because they don't love themselves. We're not going to probably have enough time today to double click all the way on that. But what I will say is this: when you have the motivation that there is always more, that you are limitless, that there is not scarcity, but abundance in this universe, that is what duplicates not only abundance, not only fulfillment, but also the ability to really run the race and bring people with you.
That's so key, Frankie. And like that's been one of the biggest unlocks I've had in the past few years is that shift from spite to service.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
it took me burning out. I watched the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan. Did you watch that, Frankie?
Of course. Yeah, it's excellent.
So the most apparent thing in that documentary was how spiteful, angry, and jaded Michael Jordan was at the end of his career.
Mm.
Still venom in his voice, like this guy talks smack about this, and I proved him wrong here, and just like bitter and old and just haggard guy, dude. I'm like, you're the best basketball player of all time, but like, I don't want to be you as an old man. You're
Yeah,
not having fun with life. You are still like this guy did this guy did that.
it's
I don't want to be
crazy,
this
huh?
guy, right? So I'm not comparing myself to Michael Jordan. But I'm also not comparing myself to Michael Jordan, Frankie.
Yeah,
Like I very much have that inside me in spades, where like I am that guy inside. If I let it go, I could be that high octane, potent mix of just spite, venom, and bitterness. But like, it's not healthy to have that long term, and I really don't want to turn into that guy. So I'm transitioning now to service. Your
yeah,
success is my success. My success is
hmm
your success.
no doubt.
And that's a very
And and
intentional move, right?
and it creates extraordinary engagements. I mean, the fact is that concept of service, especially defined the way that we've defined it here today, is the secret to whatever problem you're trying to solve, whether it's selling or growing or innovating or whatever, because that's where this is interesting. And I want to take us home here for the sake of time. And I want you to tell me just real quickly, what have you found? Because I always love this part. How have you found a way to use what you've learned, your new framework, your passion for what you do in the keynote, and give that as a gift that can unlock something for the corporate organization as a whole? And what is the main end result or impact from that framework for the company, for the organization?
I think the mindset is so key, and I try to really instill that in the keynote. Like, that's the biggest takeaway, is that mindset shift of it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it. And that's with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Could be like, my team's downsizing, we lost an account. Like, okay, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters. How do you adapt? How do you pivot? How do you pivot on this space? But I do a lot of hacks in my presentations that kind of allow them to take away, do better than yesterday, tomorrow. So like a package of hacks they can use tomorrow to get a new routine and start with a morning routine, which is quite big now. But I've got a whole bunch of hacks that are quite interesting and unique, and they're very much my weird kind of place that things come from.
Yeah.
But how I adjust, like for instance, I'll share one hack with you now, if you don't
Yeah,
mind,
go for it. I
Frankie.
was about to ask you that. Give us a hack.
So I call this icebreakers. Okay,
Okay.
an icebreaker is not a social icebreaker, but walking in London can be quite busy. The circuses are just that, a bloody circus. Oxford Circus,
Yep.
Piccadilly Circus, they're a gong show, right?
Yep.
An icebreaker is someone walking in your direction. You want to slide in behind them and let them break the ice for you, like a real icebreaker in the Arctic. No one can walk in between you two because you're right up behind them, but you're saving that bandwidth. You're saving that tax. With a brain injury, there's now a tax on my fatigue that's like my battery's about 75%, right?
Yep.
75%, and it drains faster. So I can save that bandwidth every time going through the icebreakers, through busy spots. If you live in a busy city, try this icebreaker hack out and let me know if it doesn't work for you. I'll be shocked. But I've got maybe a whole bunch of these hacks and stories that I kind of shared that are lighthearted, fun. They're weird for sure. But hey, man, so am I. That's okay. But they allow you to like shift your mindset tomorrow and be better than yesterday tomorrow.
Excellent. And so, a lot of people talk about what can we do tomorrow? What are we going to do Monday when we get back from the event? Things like that. And I love that that's where your head's at. What do you see as like the next part of your journey? Are you working on a book or anything that's kind of like the next level up that you're thinking about?
No book just yet. I was thinking about this a bit the past couple of days, and I think that's just not going to be on the table for me in the next couple of years. My next step is to get established in the speaking world and more consistent keynotes.
Yeah.
Maybe, and I've got my favorite keynote to give is an hour and a half keynote that I give, and it's got the reason why is there's two slides, they're just pictures, and the audience picks the pictures they want me to hear the story about. So I got one that's Brussels sprouts, and it always gets picked first, no matter what. And it's
well, what's the other picture?
Well, there's a whole bunch of other pictures on this slide, but like the
Okay, gotcha.
I'll get picked first, right? And I always say like, well, thank you for picking that. That's my worst memory on the medical space. My most controversial take on this whole presentation is right now. Brussels sprouts. I hate them.
How do they vote, by the way?
They just yell it out.
Okay, whoever's just the loudest.
Yeah, just like I want to hear Brussels sprouts. I want to hear retainer. I want to hear icebreakers. I want to hear car. I want to hear.
If Brussels is the loudest, you go with that.
It's always the first one picked because everyone's like, "What's the story behind Brussels sprouts?" And I always preface it by saying this is my most controversial take on this whole presentation because I hate Brussels sprouts.
So you have a choose your own adventure keynote. That's fun.
Yeah, it's fun, man. But it's an hour and a half. It's a bit bougie with time requests, an hour and a half time frame. It's my favorite to give because it's the most off piece. It's the less structured. It's the more me talking off the cuff and off the huff and
and a lot of times the strongest connection. Yeah, I think that there's more and more. That's what I think people are wanting now. Obviously, it only works in certain size rooms, and sometimes the smaller rooms are even more powerful for that type of deal.
And it only works with a time frame that allows that. So an hour and a half time frame is fine. Hour time frame is not
more of a master class workshop type deal.
Yep. But it's my favorite one to do because it's just like, what story do you want to hear? And the stories about like me traveling, living on a beach tent for a week, almost being homeless in Croatia for a little while when I moved to Sweden. All these weird stories about like me and my perspective and how they can help you understand and unlock your life and your hardship that you're facing. Because like when you shift the way you look at the world, Frankie, the world you look at changes, right? And if I can give you that perspective shift, right? I want to be that perspective shift for you. Like, is it this way or is it this way? Is it the worst or is it the best? Um,
And
that's
the
learning
answer, of
my
course,
eye.
is yes.
Yeah. Frankie, can I share one story with your audience if you don't mind?
Yeah, go for it.
So I shared the story in Impact 11 about learning to walk in Tooting Broadway. Okay? And this is probably the most condensed version of how my perspective shift can offer your group, right? So, Frankie, you've been to London. Have you been to Tooting Broadway?
What is it? Is that a street or
Tooting Broadway
neighborhood?
is an area, a borough in London.
Don't remember. Actually, it's
Okay,
been
all
20
right.
plus years, so that's a good
Fair enough,
question.
brother. Fair enough.
I've been to Piccadilly Circus, but
That's fair. That's fair. So, Tooting Broadway is an area in South London,
okay.
an area they call up and coming. Think loud sirens, drugs, gangs. It's dirty, it's hectic, and boy, is it busy.
Hmm.
Walk with a cane, I'm walking with an eye patch. After 4 months in a wheelchair, I'm literally Bambi on ice. I turn the corner to walk on the high street of Tooting Broadway for the first time, immediately get slammed into by someone. I stagger back a few feet. Someone scurries past me on the right hand side. I thought I was done with the rats at this stage. Someone had been stabbed on the sidewalk over here. I'm thinking this is a pretty wild place to learn to walk. After a few days of this, I'm thinking this is the worst place to learn to walk in the world.
Yeah.
Can't they see I'm trying to walk here? Can't they see I'm trying here? And then one day my perspective shifted. Maybe this isn't the worst place to learn to walk in the world. No, this is the best. If I
Mm,
can walk here, I can walk anywhere. And
right.
Chumbo didn't change, right, Frankie? But it went from the worst to the best in my mind, and I reflected that. What are you looking at in your life you're convinced is the worst? Convinced is the absolute worst. Hey, maybe it is the worst.
Hmm.
Or maybe you can find a way to turn down the suck a little bit. Shift that perspective a little bit. Iron Mike Tyson famously said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
That's right.
Now, your punch may not be a brain hemorrhage, right, Frankie? Odds are pretty slim it will be. But it will be a job loss, a breakup, a
Hmm.
diagnosis for you, a loved one. You will take that punch in the mouth. How you respond?
Hmm.
I'm offering a compass, not a map, but a compass. It always points towards true north.
Hmm.
Always. We'll look at things like mindset, perspective, and hacks. Hacks that will let you and your team be better than yesterday tomorrow. So my name's Dan MacQueen. And the reason why I told you that story about learning to walk and tune Broadway is when you change the way you look at the world, Frankie, the world you look at can change. And you don't need a brain hemorrhage to understand that.
Hmm.
That's kind
No,
of my most concise.
I love it.
How is a brain injury related
Yeah,
to
you
me?
don't need a brain. You don't need a brain injury to know that, which is great. Look, this is I love. We could talk about this forever, and I love that you have uncovered this secret of the universe in the way that you have, because it's very similar to what happened with me with addiction. And it's what you every single thing that bad happens or failure and those types of things, reframing those as opportunities is the essence of hacking limitlessness. It is
Yeah.
absolute. It is the key. And when you get to a point where you can do it quicker, and you move to that mindset quicker, some people might be like, "Oh, that you're too optimistic or you're too glass half full." But going with glass half full doesn't change how much water is in the glass. All that changes is the way that I'm going to feel about how much water is in the glass. So do I want to feel good about it and use that, or do I want to just sulk in it and not use it? It's not going to change how much water we have. And I think that's the most important thing, is that you have to first accept what is, which is the amount of water in the glass, and you have to
Yeah.
accept that it's not personal, to your point, and that life happens, but there's an also inside that glass of water is half a glass of water. So drink up. It's like that's what I think is the biggest thing that people have to walk away with. And I love how I meet people like yourself, and a truth about the matrix, about this universe, about this dimension that is the exact same truth that I know. And we just met. That's how I know it is a universal truth. And it's always such a joy to have people like you on the show. And it confirms that the things that we're talking about 100% are universal. They're not geographical. They're not constricted to gender. They're not constricted to any of the limitations that we might put ourselves in, race, any of that. It's not constricted to that. These are unlocks that are available to all humans. The only qualification is that you be a human.
Frankie, that's very well said.
All right. So how do we find out more about Dan MacQueen?
Well, thank you, Frankie. You can reach me on my website, MacQueen Dan, MacQueen.com. Or MacQueen Dan, sorry, MacQueenDan.com.
Nice. Okay. So
And
just
MacQueen Dan
reverse.
across the socials as well.
Okay, great. MacQueenDan.com. I love it. Well, thanks again for being on the show. It is an absolute pleasure. Can't wait to get this out to the world. And for all of you who have been listening, check out Dan MacQueen, learn more about his story and the ways that he might be able to help you unlock acceptance and a new mindset shift. Until next time, you're listening to the Love Your Weird podcast. Farewell.